The New York Times reporting that last week's election in Kentucky could be a hint of things to come for all of us in 2020. According to the paper, quote, a few hours after polls closed in Kentucky last Tuesday, a Twitter user posted a message to his 19 followers saying he had just shredded a box of Republican mail-in ballots. It wasn't true, but that seldom matters on social media anymore. The Times reports the account does not appear to be from Kentucky. For starters, Louisville was misspelled. Twitter has since suspended that account. Yet the damage has been done, and the false claim is still spreading on its own tonight. Quote, hyper-partisan conservatives and trolls were pushing out a screenshot of the message, boosted by what appeared to be a network of bots and providing early grist for allegations of electoral theft in Kentucky. High-profile right-wing figures were soon tweeting out their own conspiracy theories about the election being stolen, messages that were in turn pushed by even more trolls and bots. And the Bevin campaign, the losing campaign of the incumbent governor, began talking about irregularities in the vote without offering any specifics or evidence. The Times says there's no evidence of any actual irregularities in the voting. Republican Governor Matt Bevin, there on the right, still has not conceded to Democrat Andy Beshear. But today, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, who we quickly add is from Kentucky, told reporters Bevin came up short. And barring some dramatic reversal, it appears Kentucky is getting a new governor. Well, here with more on election disinformation, Clint Watts, a former FBI special agent, a distinguished research fellow at the Foreign Policy Research Institute, author of Messing with the Enemy, Surviving in a Social Media World of Hackers, Terrorists, Russians, and Fake News, exactly what we've been talking about here in this segment. I have in front of me this tweet in question. I don't know why I want to read it in a Russian accent, but it says, just shredded a box of Republican mail-in ballots, bye-bye Bevin. What is going on here? What do people look for along these lines? And what's the alarm bell for 2020?
I think the alarm bell for 2020 as well was the Russians that were the forerunners in 2016. It will be Americans that do this to other Americans in 2020.
No barrier to entry, I guess.
There's no barrier to entry. We've seen a proliferation of disinformation on social media. Russia will be one of many. And the ones with the most technology and the most money really come down to political campaigns, political supporters, activists. They're really going to blow this out. And I think what you're seeing with a lot of these social bots, this computational propaganda, is that anybody can rent these on the dark web. They can make them, they can deploy them, and they can have a dramatic effect just with one tweet perfectly timed on the right topic in the right day.
If you have 19 followers, speaking of collusion, doesn't this kind of require you to have gamed out one of those people to see it, like it, send it on its way?
Usually. And what it comes down to is when you have key influencers in an audience that are looking for a reason to justify the outcome they want, in this case, that it's a Bevin supporter or a Bevin outcome or election fraud or election rig, voter fraud, they will amplify that. And once it's amplified just once, it could be someone with 5 followers, it could be 1 follower, that will blow up and it will take on its own viral effect.
I have asked our bosses to make sure you are in the studio for election night 2020 because I fear so much of the plot line is going to be exactly in your area of expertise. We could be talking about 50 state elections with people alleging on social media there have been irregularities with the vote in New Mexico, in New Hampshire, Vermont, and so on.
The one thing we were worried about, my team, I worked with 2 guys, Jan Berger and Andrew Weisberg, on election night 2016. As much as we had watched the Russians, what we were worried about the most was election rigged, voter fraud. Those claims were getting people to show up at the polls, that if the outcome didn't come out the way they wanted, they would maybe secure the election or the ballot box, or there could be violence. I think that is the biggest worry in this case. And what's ironic about this is how much time has been spent, Senate Intel Committee, when I testified there, trying to convince the American people that Russia didn't change any votes. And yet, what do we have? We have a governor saying we don't know if the vote is correct. Guess who's in charge of that vote? The governor of that state. Guess who was supposed to be authorizing fundings for this Election Integrity Act? Mitch McConnell, Senate Majority Leader from Kentucky, who blocked that because why? He didn't want the feds messing around in local and state elections. Well, maybe we need to do that, Mitch McConnell.
Well done without a whiteboard connecting all those dots. So I was going to ask you, and we can use the governor of Kentucky as a jumping on point, what happens when big name candidates start to embrace something we know is a conspiracy theory?
The funniest thing, it's not funny, just the irony of this whole thing is what Russia really wanted to do long run. Short run, sure, they'll go for a candidate that supports their views and they'll elevate them, but they want to degrade democracy. And how do you do that? You erode confidence in constituents about elections, institutions, officials. Are they appointed? Are they actually winning the vote? You just want to break their confidence and trust in all of those institutions so that democracy fails and degrades. And here what we have are elected officials essentially doing that bidding for the Kremlin at this point and really tearing down democracy across the board. There will be a number of people over the next few days that will never believe that that election was genuine and authentic. And so now you have a governor taking office. Maybe it's someone who is stepping into office that doesn't have the mandate of the people. They're constantly going back and having to fight over an election that they already won. And this makes it very difficult to move forward when nobody can agree on who actually won the election.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.